So in this video, I'm going to be talking about air resources, and in specific, pollution, smog, and acid rain and their health effects to humans. So first, let's talk about pollution. Pollution is the act of dirtying land, water, or the air. And many things can contribute to this, actually. Nature can be one of them, and humans is a very large part of that. But first, let's talk about nature. Nature, volcanoes, and wildfires. They're very popular examples of how nature can affect us and release chemicals into the air. But there's also a large majority of humans affecting us. So this can include livestock, industries. They let out these toxic chemicals, and cars, they also let out those toxic chemicals. So another type of air pollution is also considered smog, which is smoke and fog. It's exactly what it sounds like. But there are many different types of smog, and one of the types I'm going to talk about in this video is called photochemical smog, which is when the sunlight mixes with very nitrogen oxides and very toxic organic compounds. And when they mix in, they make this brown photochemical smog. Smog is very common in places with large populations where the most pollution is created. For example, in Beijing, China. Beijing, China is one of a very populated place, and it's very common to smog. Now, acid rain. Acid rain is rain with very high levels of sulfic and nitric acids. So when pollution or toxic chemicals is set out into the atmosphere, it rains down as acid rain. But it can sometimes get a little bit more complicated than that. Sometimes the pollution gets transported by the wind, and the acid rain rains down somewhere else. For example, in Sweden. Sweden's acid rain comes from Britain's pollution. So there are many things that can contribute those sulfic and nitric acids. For example, as you can see in this pie chart, a very large portion of sulfic acid comes from those power stations, and a very large portion of nitric acid comes from those road transportations. But not only does it affect us, but it also affects the environment and the things, the man-made things that are built. For example, you can see in this picture over here how these trees, they had lost all their leaves because of this acid rain. And in this picture over here, you could see how worn down this building had gotten from before and after. So now that we've talked about all of this, we're going to talk about the health effects around the world first. So you could see in this picture over here how air pollution and smog, as I had told you before, it was most popular in this section over here where there's Beijing, Mongolia, Iran, and New Delhi. They get affected the most because they have the largest population. And in this picture over here, you could see the United States and its acid rain and how affected they get. In this western part of the United States, you could see how it gets affected the most. But you could see how sometimes, it could be the case, where the pollution that comes from these places can affect the western side of the United States. Very close they are. But here in Florida, we don't get that much acid rain. And now let's talk about the health effects in an individual. When air pollution, as you can see over here, it comes from natural and manufactured places. It builds up all these toxic gases in our lungs, and it actually affects us a lot. It can cause lung disease. It gives more probability of asthma attacks. It can cause coughing, wheezing. And acid rain also does affect us, as well as the environment, of course. When the acid rain rains down on water we drink, it gets contaminated, and it can cause brain damage, headaches, and fatigue. A lot of things can happen from these. But now that we've established the problems, we need to establish a solution. So we need to see how humans can help stop this pollution, because it affects us. So there are many things you can do, and here are just some examples. You can recycle. You can ride bicycles instead of cars. You can use solar energy. You could do the simplest things, like turning off the lights. This is only the beginning of the list of things that you can do to help your environment. and that is air resources, pollution, smog, and acid rain, and their health effects to humans.